Can you change your fate if you've already made a mistake? Lucy believes that even the most broken souls can be saved. The key is having the courage to believe in it. Cold wind sweeps through the narrow streets of the small town, forcing the few passers-by to pull their scarves tighter around their necks. Leaves swirl in the air before settling onto the damp asphalt, sticking to it like remnants of days gone by. Lucy hurries across the square, wrapping herself deeper in her coat, clutching a cardboard cup of coffee in her frozen fingers. It has long gone cold, but it still feels warm to her. After a long day at the clinic, filled with endless hustle, anxious glances from patients, and the constant hum of medical equipment, she longs for just one thing: to come home, curl up in a warm blanket, and lose herself in books where other people's lives become her temporary refuge. But fate has other plans. Someone turns sharply nearby, and within seconds, Lucy feels hot liquid seeping through the fabric of her coat, burning her skin. Her breath catches and her heart skips a beat. "Oh no!" she gasps, jerking her hand away as the soiled coat stubbornly clings to her body. "Oh God, I'm so sorry!" a man's voice exclaims, filled with genuine remorse. Lucy looks up, ready to respond sharply, but the words freeze on her lips. Standing before her is a tall man with dark, almost black eyes reflecting the warm glow of the streetlights. His lips part slightly as if he's about to say something more, but instead, he just gives an awkward smile as if sensing his guilt. "I didn't mean to," he adds, pulling off his scarf and offering it to her like a lifeline. Lucy instinctively takes it, catching a faint scent of spices and woody notes. Her coat is ruined, yet inside, an inexplicable flutter rises, a strange, unexplainable energy crackling in the air. The man smiles, and in his gaze, there is something inexplicably familiar. As if they have met before. As if there is something more between them than just an unfortunate accident. "I'm Andrew," he says, extending his hand. Lucy hesitates for a second but then shakes it. His palm is warm, firm, and the touch sends a faint shiver through her body, like an electric charge. "Lucy," she replies softly, as if saying something significant. For a moment they stand in silence, oblivious to the wind, the raindrops, or the distant murmur of the city rushing past them. Just the two of them, bound by coincidence that no longer feels like mere chance. Then Andrew, as if snapping back to reality, smiles sheepishly. "Since I ruined your coat, the least I can do is buy you a new coffee." Lucy lets a small smile tug at her lips. She knows she could refuse, but for some reason she doesn't want to. Something inside tells her that this man has entered her life for a reason. "All right," she agrees, "as long as it's not as hot this time." Andrew chuckles, and the sound, warm and slightly velvety, settles deep in her heart. At this moment, she has no idea that this encounter will change her entire life. Just like the autumn wind shifts the course of fallen leaves, carrying them into the unknown. The cafe they enter turns out to be a cozy nook with soft lamplight and the scent of freshly baked pastries. The warm glow of dimmed lanterns creates a sense of comfort, while the quiet murmur of conversations hums like a calm, measured accompaniment to their meeting. Lucy sits by the window, which overlooks a street wrapped in autumn twilight. Raindrops lazily slide down the glass, leaving long damp trails behind. Inside it is warm, yet a slight shiver runs through her body, whether from the lingering chill or the strange excitement she cannot quite explain. Andrew returns with 2 cups of coffee, carefully placing them on the wooden table. His movements are smooth, confident, yet there is a shadow in his eyes, something faintly troubling. Lucy notices how he observes her with a light smile, but at the same time, his gaze remains pensive, as if trying to grasp the reality of them being here together, speaking to each other. "I hope this coffee brings only warmth and not new challenges," he says with a smile, handing her the cup. Lucy takes it, feeling the pleasant heat seep into her cold fingers. For a moment it seems like there is something more to this gesture. As if in this cup of coffee, he is passing her a piece of his warmth, his presence. "We'll see," she replies with a gentle smile. "Do you live here? Or are you just passing through?" Andrew takes a small sip, holds his breath for a moment, as if weighing his words before answering. "A bit of both," he says. I grew up here but left a long time ago. Now I've returned for business. Or maybe out of nostalgia. There is a hint of sadness in his voice, and Lucy notices how he slightly tightens his fingers, as if battling some memory. She senses that there is more behind his words, but she hesitates to ask. You don't like talking about the past? She asks cautiously, looking into his eyes. Andrew averts his gaze for a second, as if seeing something beyond the window. Passers-by, raindrops on the glass, his own shadows of the past. There are things one doesn't always want to remember, he finally replies, his voice quiet, almost sorrowful. Then he looks at her again, his gaze warm yet carrying something hidden unresolved. And you? Have you lived here long? Lucy nods. Yes, since childhood. This town is the only place I can truly call home. Andrew studies her with a strange kind of attentiveness, as if memorizing her features, afraid that this moment might slip away. There is something deep, unsettling, and fleeting in his eyes, making Lucy momentarily forget to breathe. I suppose it's a good thing, to have a place you can always return to, he says softly. At that moment, a distant rumble of thunder echoes outside. Lucy flinches slightly, and Andrew subtly tightens his grip on the cup, his jaw tense. She senses something fragile within him, concealed beneath his outward confidence. An invisible thread lingers between them, delicate, almost weightless, yet tangible, like the strands of fate just beginning to weave into something greater, significant, inevitable. Lucy is in no hurry to leave the cafe. She enjoys this tranquility, a rare moment of comfort amid the usual hustle of life. The scent of freshly baked pastries and the rich aroma of coffee envelop her, creating an illusion of safety. Across from her sits a man she barely knows, yet his presence feels oddly familiar, even comforting. The soft glow of the lamp highlights his silhouette, casting shadows across his face, playing with light and darkness as if mirroring his inner turmoil. She watches as Andrew idly turns the empty cup in his hands, his fingers tapping against the cardboard in a quiet rhythm. His gaze is distant, lost in thoughts that seem far removed from the present. His breathing is steady yet tense, as if he is engaged in an internal dialogue, debating whether to voice what troubles him. You look like someone with secrets, she says with a slight smile, attempting to lighten the mood. Andrew flinches as if caught off guard. His fingers freeze, then tighten around the cup, leaving a faint dent. He smiles, but the expression is strained, a mask barely concealing his true emotions. Everyone has their secrets, don't they? He replies, his voice subdued, tinged with something almost imperceptibly sorrowful. Lucy studies his face carefully. There is exhaustion at the corners of his eyes, and deep within his gaze lies something difficult to decipher. Sadness? Guilt? Perhaps both. She wants to ask, but she is afraid of shattering this fragile moment of trust. Sometimes the past refuses to let us go, he says after a pause, his voice quiet, almost broken. And the more we try to run from it, the stronger it chases us. Lucy nods, sensing that his words are not just idle musings. Something inside her tells her that behind them lies pain, perhaps regret, scars that have never fully healed. What if we don't fight it? What if we just accept it? She asks, holding his gaze, which now seems infinitely deep. Andrew lowers his head as if considering her words, then exhales a soft, weary chuckle. His fingers unconsciously trace the rim of the cup, as though grasping for something tangible in a sea of memories. Maybe you're right, he murmurs, but some things are too difficult to accept. Lucy doesn't know how to respond. Her heart tightens with an unfamiliar emotion, something akin to fear for him. She wants to reach out, to touch his hand, to tell him that he is not alone, that she is here. But instead, she simply takes a sip of her coffee, letting silence settle between them. She is afraid of scaring him away, of breaking the delicate thread stretching between them. Outside, the rain begins to intensify, droplets drumming louder against the glass as if nature itself echoes his thoughts. Andrew gazes out at the street, and Lucy notices how his expression shifts. His eyes darken, turning pensive, as though beyond the rain-streaked window, he sees something distant, something painful. In that moment, she understands he is hiding something. Something that could change everything. Lucy steps out of the cafe, pulling her coat tighter around her. The air is fresh after the rain, carrying the light scent of damp asphalt and fallen leaves. The city seems to have exhaled, settling into a peaceful silence. She hears the muffled sound of footsteps nearby. Andrew walks slightly behind her, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. His silence weighs on her more than any words could. "Do you want to take a walk?" he asks after a long pause when they find themselves on a deserted street. Lucy nods, realizing she isn't ready to part ways just yet. There's something about this man that captivates her, draws her in like an unsolved mystery. His eyes hold an entire story, and she is overcome with the urge to learn every chapter. They walk in silence, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. Every now and then, Andrew steals brief glances at her, but Lucy can sense that his thoughts are far away. "Have you ever felt like the past is chasing you?" he suddenly asks, his voice quiet, almost dissolving into the night air. Lucy hesitates for a moment. The question is unusual, but there is a depth to it that she understands. "Sometimes," she answers honestly, "there are things that never quite let go, even when you think you've made peace with them." Andrew nods but says nothing. He seems to be wrestling with something inside himself. Lucy notices the tension in his posture, the way his hands clench inside his pockets. "I've made mistakes," he admits softly, pain lacing his voice. "Ones I'd rather forget, but they always find a way to remind me." Lucy slowly turns her gaze to him. The dim glow of the streetlights accentuates the weariness in his eyes, casting faint shadows on his face that make him look distant, almost lost. "You don't have to tell me anything," she says gently. "But if you want to, I'm here to listen." Andrew meets her eyes. There's a storm of emotions within them. Fear, guilt, despair. He seems to stand at the edge of a decision, to open his soul or to hide behind his impenetrable walls once more. And at that moment, a distant sound breaks the silence. A dull, sharp noise, like the echo of someone's past finally catching up to them. The dull sound in the night makes Lucy freeze. She turns her head, peering into the darkness, but sees only the silent outlines of buildings and the occasional glow of streetlights, flickering in the reflections of rain droplets. Andrew stops as well. His shoulders are tense, his breathing slightly uneven, and Lucy notices how his fingers instinctively curl into fists. "What was that?" she whispers, unable to hide the unease in her voice. Andrew remains silent, his gaze fixed on one of the narrow alleyways behind them. The wind carries the distant hum of traffic, but Lucy's heartbeat pounds so loudly in her chest that it feels like the entire city can hear her fear. "We need to go," he finally says, his voice firmer than before, but laced with something else, uncertainty, worry. Lucy doesn't ask questions, though her mind is flooded with them. She senses the tense energy radiating from Andrew and instinctively understands. Right now, it's best to trust him. They quicken their pace, slipping away from the open street into more secluded alleyways. Lucy feels her breath becoming uneven, but Andrew leads her with a surety that belies the turmoil she senses within him. "Did you know this would happen?" she finally dares to ask. Andrew glances at her briefly. His eyes hold too many emotions to decipher them all. "I hoped it wouldn't," he murmurs. "But the past, it doesn't let go so easily." His words send a chill down Lucy's spine. A growing sense of foreboding swells in her chest. Something important is on the verge of being revealed, but she fears what it might be. They keep walking, and the shadows behind them stretch longer with every step. They step onto a wide street where the occasional car lazily rolls over the wet asphalt, reflecting the glow of streetlights. The air is thick with the scent of rain, mingling with gasoline and damp earth. Lucy feels a tightness in her chest, a growing unease. She can't explain why, but something about this night feels off. Too quiet, too empty, as if the city itself is holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Andrew walks beside her, his steps quick but tense. Out of the corner of her eye, Lucy notices him glancing back now and then, as if expecting something. Or someone. His fingers clench into fists, his shoulders rigid as though he's ready to bolt at any moment. Andrew, she stops, forcing him to do the same. Can you explain what's going on? Her voice is firm, but inside anxiety churns. She sees the slight tremble in his lips, the darkness lurking in the corners of his eyes. His knuckles whiten as if he's gripping an invisible weight too heavy to bear alone. This isn't just a coincidence, is it? Lucy presses, locking eyes with him. Andrew exhales, his shoulders sagging, as though surrendering to something unbearable. His gaze drifts to the slick sidewalks, the metal railings, the scattered silhouettes of distant pedestrians. He seems to be searching for an answer somewhere far away, but he can't find it. No, he finally admits. It's not a coincidence. Lucy doesn't blink. Her heart pounds louder, echoing in her temples. Then tell me the truth, she urges, her voice trembling but unwavering. I have a right to know. Andrew remains silent for a few seconds. Then he looks away, his jaw tight, his eyelids quivering slightly. In his eyes, pain lingers mixed with bitter regret. I made a mistake, Lucy, he finally says. His voice is rough, as if the words are scraping his throat. A stupid, unforgivable mistake. And now I have to pay for it. She doesn't understand what he means, but she feels the weight of his words. They press down on her, making her blood rush faster. The night's cool air now feels icy. What mistake? She whispers. Andrew closes his eyes for a brief moment, then meets her gaze and answers. One that could cost me everything. The wind picks up and raindrops begin to fall from the sky, as if nature itself is mourning with him. And Lucy realizes that after this night, nothing will ever be the same. The rain intensifies slowly, turning the streets into reflective surfaces where the glow of streetlights flickers like ghostly flames. Lucy feels her heart pounding, the cold seeping through the thin fabric of her clothes, but more than anything, Andrew's words haunt her. One that could cost me everything. They echo in her mind, an omen of something inevitable. Andrew, tell me what's going on, she urges, her voice firm but trembling. What mistake are you talking about? Andrew stops. His gaze is lost in the emptiness, his face a battlefield of inner conflict. He seems to be fighting himself, deciding whether to go on. It's a long story, Lucy, he finally says, turning to her. His eyes hold exhaustion, pain, and something else she can't quite decipher. But if I tell you, you might regret asking. She takes a step closer. The rain drips down her hair, but she doesn't notice. Right now, only he matters. I don't care, Lucy says firmly. I want to know the truth. If you trust me even a little, please. Andrew exhales deeply, running a hand over his face as if trying to wipe away the invisible shadows of the past. He looks at her and something shifts in that moment. A few years ago, he begins slowly, I made a decision that changed my entire life. At the time I thought I had no choice, but now I realize it was the biggest mistake I've ever made. Lucy freezes. She can see the tension in him, how every word weighs heavy on him. What did you do? She asks softly. Andrew meets her gaze, his lips barely trembling. The answer lingers in the air, like the storm before the thunder. I betrayed the one person who trusted me more than anyone in the world. Lucy freezes. The rain continues to drum against the pavement, turning the street into a liquid mirror reflecting the dim glow of streetlights. Moisture seeps into her hair, her clothes, but she barely notices. In this moment, there is only Andrew, his heavy gaze, and those terrifying words. I betrayed the one person who trusted me more than anyone in the world. What do you mean? Her voice is barely louder than a whisper, but inside, everything tightens with foreboding. Andrew hesitates, as if hoping that by not speaking the words aloud, they will never become real. His eyes reveal an internal struggle, fear of judgment, fear of revealing a truth he may have hidden even from himself. It happened a few years ago, he finally says, looking away as if unable to meet her gaze. I worked with someone. We were partners and friends. I trusted him and he trusted me. But at some point, I made a choice that destroyed everything. Lucy stares at him, unblinking. Every word echoes in her chest, tightening around her heart like a steel band. A sense of impending doom wraps around her like a cold mist, clinging to her skin with a sticky fear. "What did you do?" she asks cautiously, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. Andrew clenches his fists, his shoulders tense as if carrying an invisible burden. His breathing grows uneven, his jaw tightening. "I betrayed him for myself, for my own safety. I thought I was doing the right thing, that I had no other choice. But I was wrong. And because of me, he lost everything." Lucy sees the slight tremble of his lips, but it's not from the cold. It's something much deeper, something eating him alive from the inside. His eyes are filled with guilt, gnawing at him for years, locked away in the prisons of his own mind. Did he die? Her voice wavers, but she has to ask, even if she dreads the answer. Andrew slowly shakes his head, and in that small movement there is boundless pain. "No." But for him it was worse than death. He ended up in a place he will never escape from. Lucy feels her mouth go dry, her fingers turning ice cold as if her body already senses something terrible. The wind rushes down the street, carrying the whispers of the night, an eerie omen of something inevitable. She wants to ask more, to understand, but she fears the truth. She feels the battle inside her, fear clashing with the need to stay, to support him. But is that enough? Andrew looks at her again, his eyes filled with silent pleading, to understand, to forgive, to not walk away. But can she? Lucy feels fear rising within her, mixed with sympathy. The cold wind seeps through her clothes, making her shiver, but it's not from the chill. It's from Andrew's words, from what she hears in his voice, an abyss of guilt consuming him. Her fingers tremble slightly, but she doesn't back away. Looking at him, she understands. Before her stands a man torn apart by his past, a man who has carried the burden of his mistakes for years, unable to make peace with them. What happened to him? Her voice is quieter than she expected, but inside, an alarm bell rings, warning that she is about to hear something irreversible. Andrew takes a deep breath, as if trying to piece together the fragmented shards of his story. His eyes, dark as a moonless night, hold the shadow of something inevitable. He clenches his jaw, and Lucy notices the muscles in his neck tightening. Each word is a struggle, as if he is pulling them from the depths of his soul. "He was set up," Andrew says, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years of exhaustion. I knew it would happen. I could have saved him, but I chose myself. I was a coward. I closed my eyes and let him end up in a place where no one survives." Lucy shudders, as if the cold air has seeped into her bones. Her fingers tighten involuntarily, and her heart skips a beat. One word echoes in her mind: betrayal. She wants to look away, but she can't. She needs to know. "Where?" she almost whispers. "Prison," Andrew answers, his voice hollow, laced with barely contained pain. "A place where people lose all hope, where days stretch into eternity, and the only way out." Lucy closes her eyes, trying to process what she's just heard. She pictures it: towering gray walls, narrow windows lined with iron bars, cold cells, the stench of dampness and wasted lives. Andrew continues, his voice growing more strained. "I didn't know what to do. I tried to justify myself, to tell myself I had no choice. But you can't hide from the truth. I took away his freedom, and with it everything he had. And since then, I've lived with that." Lucy opens her eyes. She looks at him, studying every detail of his face, the fine lines etched by exhaustion, the thin lips pressed into a firm line, the dark eyes heavy with regret. She sees a man who isn't asking for forgiveness. He has already condemned himself. He lives in a prison of his own mind, and the only thing separating him from the man he betrayed is the absence of bars. But can she forgive him? Can she live with the knowledge that she, too, is now part of this truth? Lucy feels the air around her grow heavier, as if the entire world is pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. A storm of emotions rages within her: pain, fear, anger. But above all, an inexplicable attachment to the man standing before her. She looks at Andrew, at his slumped shoulders, at his dark eyes filled with torment. He is waiting for judgment, for shouting, for her to turn away and leave him alone with his past. But Lucy does not leave. Her feet feel rooted to the ground, refusing to take that fateful step back. Slowly, she steps forward, hearing her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, whispering that this moment is crucial, that it will change everything. And you've carried this inside you all this time? Her voice is soft, but there is a slight tremor beneath the determination. She tries to grasp what it must feel like to live with such a burden. Andrew lifts his head, his eyes locking onto hers, and Lucy sees something she hadn't noticed before. It is not just guilt. It is deep soul-crushing pain. It has stretched over years, branding him with a mark he cannot erase. Every day, he exhales as if releasing a fragment of that burden. I tried to forget, but you can't run from yourself. Lucy holds his gaze. She wants to be angry, to condemn him, but before her stands a man who has already punished himself more than anyone else ever could. His guilt has lived inside him for years, eating away at him. He is not seeking forgiveness. He doesn't even hope for it. He is merely giving her a choice. Why did you tell me? Her voice wavers, but she does not look away. Andrew hesitates. His lips part slightly, but no words come out at first. He wrestles with something within himself before finally saying, "Because I couldn't keep hiding. Not from you." The words slowly sink into her soul, leaving an imprint. They echo in her mind, resonating in her heart. She realizes that now the choice is hers. To turn away, to walk away, to let Andrew's past keep them apart? Or to stay, despite the fear and the shadow of what was? She takes another step closer, hesitant but firm. Her hand lifts and she slowly, almost timidly, touches his palm. It is the lightest of touches, but to him it means more than 1,000 words. He flinches as if he cannot believe it is real, then his fingers tighten around hers, weakly at first, as if afraid she will vanish like an illusion. "We all make mistakes," she says quietly, her voice filled with understanding and something else she has yet to define. "But you are not the man you were then." Andrew does not reply. He simply looks at her, and for the first time in a long while, something like hope flickers in his eyes. It trembles like a fragile flame, but it is there. And maybe that is enough. Andrew still holds her hand, as if afraid she will vanish, as if this is nothing more than a dream that could dissolve at any moment. His fingers tremble slightly, but he doesn't let go. Lucy feels the warmth of his palm, faint but real, and senses his tension, how every muscle in his body is frozen in anticipation, as if everything depends on her next words. She wants to say something, but the words catch in her throat. The wind rushes through the street, wrapping them in cold gusts, carrying away the silence. Raindrops fall sparsely, as if nature itself is listening in, holding its breath. The world around them fades, leaving only this moment. "You shouldn't have gone through this alone," she finally whispers, her voice carrying the weight of a promise, a quiet yet firm reproach against the fate that had been so cruel to him. Andrew lets out a faint chuckle, but there is no joy in it. Only weariness, the bitterness of what he has endured. An invisible burden he has carried for so long that he no longer remembers what it feels like to live without it. "I thought it would be easier that way." His voice is hoarse, filled with years of silence and unspoken words. "That if I never told anyone, I could live with it. But the longer you hide the truth, the harder it is to breathe." Lucy looks at him, her heart tightening. She doesn't just see a man before her. She sees someone who has carried the weight of his mistakes alone for far too long. Someone who never allowed himself forgiveness, who feared that one day his past would become his final sentence. She slowly pulls her hand away but remains close. Her fingers still remember his warmth, just as her heart remembers the ragged rhythm of his breath. Andrew doesn't look away, but something shifts in his gaze. Maybe it's hope, maybe it's fear, or maybe it's something else, something neither of them can name just yet. "Do you trust me?" Lucy asks, her voice trembling with uncertainty, with the awareness of how crucial this moment is. Andrew looks at her for a long time before answering. He knows this question is more than just words. It's a promise, a step into the unknown, into a void where he has never allowed anyone before. "Yes," he finally says, his voice barely above a whisper, but there is something real in it. "I trust you." And in that second, something changes between them. They are no longer strangers. They are two people bound by something stronger than words and more terrifying than the past. Something that cannot be explained but can be felt. Lucy and Andrew walk along the deserted street, their footsteps echoing dully in the silence. The night air chills her skin, but inside something else burns. Something strong and inexplicable. Their conversation has left a mark on her, like a silent flash of lightning cutting through the darkness. Andrew walks beside her, his face partially hidden by shadows, but Lucy can feel the tension radiating from him. His trust was a step forward, but she knows it's not enough. He still holds part of himself locked away in the cage of his past, and she doesn't know if she can help him break free. "What are you thinking about right now?" she asks cautiously, breaking the tense silence. Andrew remains quiet for a few seconds, then takes a deep breath. "That if I ever decide to tell everything, I'm afraid it will already be too late," he admits softly. "Sometimes it feels like the past is chasing me, and the faster I run, the closer it gets." Lucy clenches her fingers, wanting to say something to dispel his fears, but she knows some wounds cannot be healed with words. "We don't have to live on the run, Andrew," she says gently. "You can stop. Face the fear. Allow yourself to change something." Andrew smiles, but there is more sadness than hope in his expression. "Sometimes I think it's too late to change." He shakes his head. "That everything was decided a long time ago." Lucy doesn't believe that. She doesn't want to believe that. She steps closer, feeling something invisible, tense, vibrating between them. "As long as we're alive, nothing is final," she says softly. Andrew looks at her, a long, piercing gaze filled with both uncertainty and gratitude. He wants to believe her, wants to hold on to that thought, but fear still grips him like iron chains. And somewhere in the distance, in the darkness, the past truly refuses to retreat. Lucy feels her heart pounding faster, echoing heavily in her temples. The air is thick with tension, dense like the fog wrapping around them in this dark, nearly deserted part of the city. They stop at a crossroads where the dim glow of the streetlights casts long shadows on the wet asphalt, turning it into a mirror of the past from which there is no escape. The scent of rain mingles with the faint aroma of his skin, stirring within her a strange mix of closeness and fear. Andrew stands beside her, yet it feels as if he is slipping away again, hiding behind an invisible wall he has built over the years. His hands are tense, fingers trembling slightly, as if restraining something deep inside. Lucy senses that he is teetering between the decision to open his heart and the urge to flee into the darkness where no one can find him. She steps closer, searching his face. His dark eyes conceal a storm of emotions, his lips press tightly together, but his breath quickens when he notices her approach. "I know you're afraid," she whispers, clenching her fingers into a fist to steady her own trembling. "But you're not alone." Andrew flinches, as if her words have cracked the fragile shell of his defenses. He exhales sharply, his shoulders dropping, yet the tension remains. He runs a hand over his face as though trying to wipe away the remnants of his thoughts, but they linger. "Lucy." His voice is barely audible, laced with doubt, pain, and loss. "If you knew what I condemned myself to." She doesn't let him finish. Her heart tells her she can't let him retreat into himself again. "Do you think I don't care? That I would just walk away?" Her voice carries a mix of pain and determination, fear and hope. "I see you, the real you. Not who you were, but who you are now. And that's not a monster." Andrew stares at her, and something flickers in his eyes, an almost desperate hope, fragile yet real. He steps closer, his fingers trembling before he raises his hand, brushing her cheek lightly. His fingertips trail across her skin as if afraid she might vanish. "I don't deserve this," he murmurs, but Lucy already knows the truth is different. She feels it in the way his breath stills, in the way he looks at her, as if for the first time in a long while, he has found something worth holding on to. She places her hand over his, her touch gentle but firm. Closing her eyes, she feels the warmth of his palm, the pulse of life beneath his skin. "You deserve more than you think," she whispers, pouring everything she cannot express into those words. For a moment the world stands still, and it seems as if the past is finally receding, making way for something new. But they both know the final choice still lies ahead. And that choice will change everything. Lucy feels the cold wind cutting through her to the bone. Yet inside her a fire burns, warming her from within. Her heart pounds loudly, its rhythm intensifying with every second. She does not back down, does not look away. In this moment she understands this is the turning point. Andrew stands before her, his breathing unsteady, his eyes filled with doubt, but beneath it all something new flickers, faint yet alive. He no longer tries to hide, no longer averts his gaze, as if, for the first time in a long while, he is ready to face reality. He stands before her as he truly is, wounded, broken, but still alive. I can't just believe that it's this simple. His voice is low, hoarse, barely audible over the night's silence. That you can just take the past and leave it behind. Lucy steps closer, her fingers trembling, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming emotions washing over her. She looks straight at him, into his pain, into his fears, refusing to let him retreat back into the darkness he has been trying to escape for so long. The past doesn't disappear, Andrew, she says softly but firmly, her voice filled with warmth and tenderness. But it doesn't have to define who you are now. You get to choose who you become. Andrew lowers his head, his lips pressed together. Something tightens painfully in his chest, as if old wounds are reopening. He is fighting within himself, against the burden he has carried for so long. But then, after what feels like an eternity, he slowly lifts his gaze. What if I don't know how to be different? He whispers, his voice a mixture of fear and hope. Lucy smiles, warm, reassuring, and for him that smile becomes something real, something to hold on to. She gently reaches for his hand, their fingers intertwining, and in that simple touch, there is more strength than in 1,000 words. Her palm is warm, carrying the unspoken promise that he will not be alone. Then I'll help you, she says. The wind no longer feels as cold. The past still whispers in the dark, but it no longer holds power over him. He tightens his grip around her fingers, taking that final step forward. A step toward life, a step toward a new beginning. True strength is not in forgetting past mistakes, but in accepting them and allowing oneself the chance to start anew. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so you don't miss more heartwarming stories.